We're going to do a little bit of a discussion thing again today, where it's news of the day, sure, and we're discussing things in the world of hockey, in the sphere, which we all love and loathe at the same time, right? And if you're a Leaf fan right now, there's going to be a big reckoning coming, I guess, with Hyman coming back, because you got to move somebody out, and it's either going to be Spezza, Timashov, or Shore. And I don't think it's a secret to anybody that Mike Babcock wants Jason Spezza to be the one to go. He's been scratched 8 times this season, and even after scoring a goal in a game, he's still kind of like, eh. And when asked about Jason Spezza and how he's playing, his answer is basically about how passionate he is for the game and how he clearly loves hockey. So, if you come up to me and say, hey, Shannon, so what did you think about that game of hockey I just played? And I said, boy, you really enjoy this, don't you? That's not what I asked you. Yeah, boy, you really like it. So, Babcock's not making anybody feel like he wants to keep him. Here's the thing. It's not his say. Kyle Dubas has final say. So will Kyle Dubas demote Shore or Timashov, or is it going to be Spezza? And then the question that gets asked, and I think this is overblown, is whether or not, if Spezza gets demoted, does that affect whether or not another veteran player is going to want to go to Toronto? I think the question becomes, is a veteran player going to necessarily look at Babcock as a guy who's going to want to play them? This is kind of his MO, and it has been dating back to Chris Chelios in Detroit. But when you win a bunch of games as a coach, players will want to play for you. But they're going to have to do something. And then the other thing that's kind of hanging over the team is that Tyson Barrie has 5 assists in 17 games. He doesn't know why he's not scoring. We don't know why he's not scoring, but we're over 20% of the way through Toronto's season, and he's not scoring. So, since that's what he was brought in to do, and they gave up Kadri to make it happen, the one thing I will say is, at least it's driving down his asking price to stick around, right? So that's a benefit, I guess. He's kind of making it easier to keep the defense together for cap purposes. If he scores 20 assists and no goals, he's not going to get a $8 or $9 million on the market, right? Yeah, it's a one of those faint hope kind of things. Jean-Gabriel Pageau has become quite the story among Ottawa fans and around the rest of the NHL. He's at a plus 15 with a team that doesn't score. There was a goal scored with him on the ice the other night, goal against, and that was the first time that it happened in weeks, I guess. That just doesn't happen. His plus minus is excellent. He has 7 goals so far, and we'll see how far this goes, because if he continues to put up numbers like this, his trade value is excellent. Now, they'll want to keep him around. I have no doubt that Pierre Dorion would love to keep Pageau around. He's a glue guy. He's a heart and soul guy. But if he drives up his price too much, I don't know that Ottawa necessarily keeps him around. And we'll keep an eye on that one. Gary Bettman yesterday spoke about, how they're going to keep having games in Europe, which should surprise nobody. I know there's fans that are upset because, they're having these games in Europe and it disrupts the schedule, but it's a money thing, really. And yet, the NHL and Gary Bettman, who's the spokesman for the league, say they have basically no interest in the 2022 Olympics. Now, a big part of this is that there was a falling out between the NHL and the IOC. And the International Olympic Committee, they're for anybody who says, well, the NHL's really greedy, I support the Olympics, you're not doing enough research on the Olympics. The Olympics, they're like, basically it's like, okay, NHL, we want to take your players, we're going to promote them as being in our Olympics. You can't promote that they're going to the Olympics because we own them. So, and for owners of NHL teams, it's exactly as I've stated many times, which is there's an injury risk. You're letting your best players go play in a tournament somewhere else where they could get hurt playing hockey, and it could affect your team after the Olympic break is over. So, there's a lot of things to weigh here, as much as we as fans and the players would love to go. And the players who don't go would love to get that break. So the NHL, it sounds like, is still not going to the Olympics in 2022. This, of course, is going to be negotiated between themselves and the NHLPA. Or maybe the NHLPA can be talked into, hey, it's not worth the risk factor of it. Eric Halla may be out for longer than was initially thought. So Halla, this is where Vegas fans jump up and go, that's why we traded Halla. He does tend to get hurt. And it sounds like it's going to be more than day-to-day, according to when Brad Brindamore was asked about day-to-day. He said, no, it's more than that, but he wouldn't get further into it than that. So is it week-to-week? His answer probably was, no, it's not week-to-week, so it's day and a half to day and a half. Like, again, secrecy around all this. Speaking of which, Zibanejad apparently will not be returning tomorrow for the Rangers. Still no timeline with him. And Mark Stahl's out a minimum of 2 weeks after having surgery on his ankle. It's minimum because he's reevaluated in 2 weeks. Keep in mind when they have these injury reports, very often they'll say this player's out for 2 weeks, this player's out for 3 weeks, this player's out for... And if you read through it, you'll see they are to be reevaluated at that point. That doesn't necessarily mean they come back. That's why it's minimum 2 weeks. Speaking of guys who've been out and they're back, Sven Baertschi had a decent game for the Canucks last night. Played around 13 minutes, and Travis Green said he had some nice looks out there. And Baertschi, really, I don't see him staying in Vancouver at all. I think that once everybody's healthy, and Mott's going to be out for a while, but once everybody's healthy, Baertschi's not going to be kept around. And I think Jim Benning would still prefer to trade him. So hopefully he's helping his trade value. That's the question mark right now is Baertschi. And can Baertschi do much to help his trade value to the point where a team's going to say, yeah, all right, we'll take that cap hit? Because this cap hit's kind of high for the production and for the risk of injury as well. Today, Victor Olofsson got his first goal in 10 games. He now sits at 7 goals, 12 points in 17 games. And he is still one of the top scorers among rookies in the NHL this year, and maybe that'll get him going. He had 3 assists over the 9 games in between the goals, so we'll see whether or not that gets him going. It's not a coincidence that Buffalo's cooled off and Olofsson cooled off at the same time. They need their depth going. They need a lot of players going in order to get back to where they were with that hot start that they had. I also wanted to talk about something that I've noticed with the Islanders this year, and I wanted to throw this out there for you guys to discuss with me. And with Barry Trotz changing the whole culture with the New York Islanders, and the New York Islanders becoming a much better team, has he made Barzal an excellent two-way forward who could score goals and who could play at his own end of the ice to a point where we can start talking about maybe he's becoming a Bergeron-esque player. And we talk about this with Barkov. Of course, Devils fans will jump in with Nico Hischier immediately. But is Barzal becoming that? Because Barzal has made defensive mistakes over the years, but it looks like this season he is just completely bought in. He's having a very good season offensively, and he's taking care of things in his own end. So is he becoming, and I don't like to say Bergeron necessarily, and yet he would obviously be the one that everybody would compare him to. It's sort of like back in the 80s, you'd be comparing everybody to Bob Gainey and then Guy Carbonneau, and now it's Patrice Bergeron. So is Barzal on the verge of being known as one of the better two-way forwards in the NHL, one of the best two-way centers in the NHL, or are we going to see a return of bad defensive habits? I don't think so, not under Trotz's system, and just the way that Barry Trotz is coaching that team. Now 11 wins in 12 games. They haven't lost in regulation in 12. It's really, really impressive what the Islanders have going on. I also wanted to talk about something, and I know I do my best not to talk about this, but it's starting to bug me again. So right now the Florida Panthers have 5 extra points. 5 points where they've lost either an overtime or a shootout. And New Jersey has 4 of them. And one thing I hear a lot during Florida broadcasts, and you hear it during the New Jersey ones as well, they're managing to get points. And for me, when I'm talking about teams that are playing, I look at wins and losses. Shootouts, you can write that off and say, all right, in the old days that'd be a tie. They're playing for the extra point. But when a team loses in overtime, and especially if it's really early in overtime, it's like 20 seconds, I don't look at that as a fan and say, well, they didn't really lose. And so to me, and again, I'm doing the power rankings tonight, and it always makes things kind of a little different because I will look at an overtime win and overtime loss as a little different than regulation. I'm more impressed by the regulation wins and losses. And yet the conversation's out there that Florida, well, they're getting points. So you'll hear like, well, Florida is one of the hottest teams in the league because they haven't gone without a point in 10 out of 12 games. But then you look at the actual record. And so, and I think about it from a standpoint of somebody that follows other sports in North America. And you don't see a team saying, well, we lost in 15 innings. So, yeah, it's a loss, but at least it took 15 innings, so we're pretty happy about it. No. Football, if you lose in overtime, you don't see NFL players saying, well, we lost, but it's overtime, but hey, at least we lost in overtime. And it's one of those things that, and sometimes people will point out, well, you could do a 3-2-1 point system. I tried that 2 years ago in a video. It doesn't make a difference. I did. I tried the 3-2-1 point system. 3 points for regulation win, 2 for an overtime or shootout win, and 1 for the overtime or shootout loss. And it really didn't change the standings. Made virtually no difference. But the overtime loss points, to me, they kind of mask when a team isn't necessarily playing particularly well and they're not closing out games. So that's where I take issue sometimes with the, well, they're getting points if they've lost 3 in a row in overtime or shootouts, this kind of thing. For me, what I see as a team that's not closing out games. So I'd be interested to know what you guys think and whether or not the overtime loss points, and again, I know I'm talking to a lot of people that it's always been there. I remember a time when it wasn't. So for me, it's still, I remember before and I look at it now and I sometimes think, before, yeah, we used to get 20 ties a season for some teams. But it felt like things were more black and white in terms of who was playing well and who wasn't. And with the NHL trying to create this parity, and that's why we have the 3-point games, is to try to create a parity and keep everybody closer together points-wise. I sometimes feel like it gives the impression a team might be playing better than they are. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. If a team is 10-10, is that less impressive than a team that's 10-6-4? And does it matter how those 4 points are accumulated? I'd be interested to know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.